Thank you for joining us for this special program today, which is entitled When the Horrors of War Meet the Power of Literature, Reactions and Transformations with Sarai Shavit and Yael Segalovitz. I'm Rebecca Goldberg, the Executive Director at the Helen Diller Institute for Jewish Law and Israel Studies, which is based in Berkeley Law. And normally that's where our programming would be, but today is the first day that we can't do a program there because law students go into exam mode. A little bit about the Helen Diller Institute, which through its two programs, one in Jewish Law, Thought and Identity, and one in Israel Studies, the Helen Diller Institute provides a rich academic forum for students and for faculty. It currently houses the undergraduate fellowship of between 30 and 40 students. It brings visiting faculty from Israeli and U.S. universities to teach on campus and do research. And it hosts the university's undergraduate minor in Israel Studies, which just started this year. And it offers dozens of lectures and programs for the public and campus communities. And we've had some amazing programs this semester. And I'm also to say that this is our last public program of the semester. So please visit our website, social media, and e-blast for information about programming and recordings. This program as well will be recorded today. And all of our programs are enabled by philanthropic support, so we're very grateful for community partnership. This program today is co-sponsored with the Center for Jewish Studies and the Department of Comparative Literature, and we're very grateful for the opportunity to collaborate with CJS and with Comparative Literature on programming such as my Arad earlier this semester and Sarai Shavit, also on the visiting appointment of Yael Segalovitz, and on this venue for today as well. I'm happy now to welcome our speakers. Sarai Shavit is a poet, writer, and literary editor. She is co-editor of the Hebrew journal Moznayim and has published 2 works of prose and 3 poetry collections. Her poetry has been translated into English, German, French, Malayalam, Portuguese, and Italian. Shavit is the recipient of several prestigious awards, including the Poetry on the Road Award, the Rabinovich Foundation Award, and the Common Ground Award for Fiction. And in 2023, she received the WIZO Adelina Della Pergola Award for Translated Literature for her book, Figures of Speech. Shavit teaches literature and creative writing at Tel Aviv University, where she is also a research fellow. And I'm excited now to welcome Yael Segalovitz.
That's good.
She's the 2024-2025 Israeli Institute Visiting Professor at the Helen Diller Institute. At UC Berkeley, she's teaching courses in Hebrew literature and translation in the Department of Comparative Literature and Jewish Studies. And we're lucky we will have her here next year as well. She's an assistant professor in the Department of Foreign Literatures and Linguistics at Ben-Gurion University of the Negev. Professor Segalovitz received her PhD from the Department of Comparative Literature at UC Berkeley, where she was a Townsend Center Fellow and a Posen Fellow. Her research spans American, Hebrew, and Brazilian modernisms with a focus on transnational literary exchanges, complemented by her work translating literary works across these cultural contexts. Her book, How Close Reading Made Us, The Transnational Legacies of New Criticism, follows the global circulation of close reading beyond the Anglophone orbit and its praxis's impact on modernist literary production. And her current project follows the resurgence of psychoanalytic object relations theories within the American humanities, leading to the emergence of a new hybrid literary genre she terms psychoanaliterature. So please join me in welcoming Sarai Shavit and Yael Segalovitz.
Thank you.
So I'll just note that Professor Shavit will present first some of her work, and then they will be in conversation, and then we will have Q&A as a group.
Hello, my name is Sarai Shavit. First, I would like to express my gratitude to Berkeley University and Helen Diller Institute, and especially to Rebecca Goldberg and Yael Segalovitz for their generous invitation and hospitality, and to the Center of Jewish Studies and Department of Comparative Literature that supports on this very special event. In these painful and distressing times of an ongoing war, my presence here is anything but given, so thank you for that. Well, today I want to discuss literature, And not any just literature, but a special book that I'm co-editing. In my profession, I am a writer, editor, and a culture manager. I live between Athens, Turin, and Tel Aviv. But I was born and raised and lived most of my life in Israel. And whenever I say I'm from Israel, people immediately see war. So let's address the elephant in the room. There is a tragic war right now that is still happening. And you're probably thinking, what does she think about the ongoing killing in Gaza? Where does she stand on the political map? What kind of a role could a literary editor take in a situation of war? Is she one of the good guys or the bad? Well, honestly, I'm asking myself the very same questions. And the reason that I wanted to come here today is not to talk about the extreme situation of war that I hope none of us will ever need to experience, but it is an opportunity to show how literature editors deal in a political crisis and challenges. So, 3 years ago, I got a phone call with a job offer to edit a book of Hebrew-Palestinian stories. My first instinct was to say no. As an editor, I saw many times how cultural political projects end before they start, for two main reasons. First, funding. Most of the Israeli-Palestinian institutes do not support mutual projects. And second, artists. They don't want to participate in any of these projects. The political chaos and conflict between the nations is so big that artists don't want to put their hands in it. Back then, it seems to me that my strength as an editor was my professional judgment. I don't get into literary projects that I feel won't happen in the end. But I went to the meeting, and during the meeting I discovered that this project is better than I thought. The Politikan, Danish newspaper and publisher, ordered this book in a memory of Herbert Pondak, who was a Danish peace activist involved with the Oslo agreements. The producer is the Peace Forum Circle, which had already hired an Arabic editor named Rawya Burbara. At that moment, I was happy to find out that Rawya is in the project because I knew her. I interviewed her to a literary TV show I used to host a few years ago. So the project had money, co-editor, team. I was in. So let's take a moment to interpret this. What does a good culture project need in order to exist? Great idea, passion for action, good partners, funding, strategy, roadmap. So we started to work on our project. Rawya knew the Palestinian literature field by heart, and I knew the Hebrew one. And together we were trying to figure out what kind of a book we want to produce. At first, we wanted to create a non-fiction documentary book about the conflict between nations. But we felt that this narrative already existed, and we wanted to bring something different to the world. A book that will present a new point of view, of hope and reconciliation. At that point, we defined the inner goal of the project, the compass that leads it. We chose fiction because we wanted to use the power of fiction to move the readers to a new perspective. Like those books, a new perception of slavery, a new perception of women's rights, a new perception of war traumas. There are books that really change reality. What can our book do? A poem cannot stop a bullet. A novel cannot defuse a bomb. But we are not helpless. We can write our own future. This guy, Salman Rushdie, I'm sure you're familiar with. We have no hope of rationality understanding the Arabs, and therefore we have no choice but to go back and delve into their literature. Hebrew writer Aleph Bet Yehoshua. And the words are found in the black box. The author Salman Natou says, "I believe that literature is the black box of every nation." When I first started working with Rawya, she presented me a story entitled No, by a female writer from Gaza, who is also participating in our current project. This woman, who writes under cover name Sama Hassan, expresses in the story that the most difficult word for a woman in Gaza is to say no. She couldn't say it to her husband, to her father, to her children, to her father-in-law. Literature was her black box of secrets. We will come back to that idea soon. So, this is the background of our project, and we started to work. Obviously, most Hebrew writers have never met Palestinian writers. So we were searching for a model to create a common ecosystem for writing. Usually, when a writer writes, he works alone and later with his editor. In this project, we wanted the writers to write alone but work together, to establish a common creative ground for all stories. We didn't know how to do it, so we searched for a model. We found few models in the education system, in B international schools, and in previous art projects between Israel and Palestine. The most important thing that we learned from other projects was that we needed to build trust between the participants. As soon as they stop focusing on the conflict, but share their own personal stories, hard and sad as it may be, they will feel less attacked and angry and start listening to each other and maybe work together. Well, it is important to note that our stories choices were limited to work for which we obtain copyrights or direct permission from the authors. The principle of securing copyrights should not be taken for granted. Over the years, many texts from Arabic literature have been translated into Hebrew without obtaining the necessary permission. Ibrahim Nasrallah, the author of the novel Time of the White Horses, writes, and I quote, "They kill us and translate us, following their orientation based on killing the victim and then grilling him into the interrogation, his desires. This translation is like bringing murder victims into the interrogation chamber." Given that the Arabic-speaking population in Israel consists about 20% of the total population, back in the 90s, Arab and Hebrew scholars, writers, educators, and translators have begun to feel that the right time to read each other's literature due to the conflictual situation will never come. But the peace agreements back then between Israel and the Arab countries, as well as the peace negotiation between Israel and the Palestinian Authority, have encouraged both sides to seek closer connection. They realize that one of the non-invasive methods to achieve it is through literature. However, the task of translation is carried out under asymmetrical conditions, of course, in terms of political power. And this asymmetrical reflects also the translation and in the power dynamics between the two languages. So, process of collecting the stories was not an easy one. It required a special effort from us. We approached many writers, and in the beginning some of them agreed, and most of them refused. And within time, when we started to work with them, they began to apologize that they cannot participate in that kind of a book. It was difficult for them, on the Arab side, to be the victim that collaborates with those who kill them, with the enemy. Some writers sent us a story, and before we started translate it, they asked us not to. one of them told Rawya that he had withdrawn from the project because he could not betray his readers. We deleted name after name from the list until we feared that the political matters would become more complicated and that everyone would withdraw from the project. It was 2022. Other writers asked us to sign the agreements instead of them and to pay them their fee from our personal accounts and not from the association's account. They were afraid for the name in the Arab world, and they were afraid that they could be accused of betrayal and lose, of course, readers. Here, it's in Hebrew though, but I will interpret. You can see our data table that shows the progress of the stories. In red, for example, a writer who withdrawn from the project is marked. In the comments, there are notes that some of the stories are refusing to return from editing, most likely due to the writer's concern regarding participating in the project. But eventually, these our writers, Palestinians, Israeli Arabs, Druze, Christians, Muslim, Jews, Hebrew. We see that from a geographical point of view, they represent many regions, from the north to the south, from the Galilee to the Carmel, to the Triangle area, Tel Aviv, Hebron, Jerusalem, and Gaza. Well, the real challenge was to bring the writers together. People who were born into a bloody political mess, into occupation and wars, enemies that had never met before. So we set up a meeting with the writers to expose them to our project. We didn't know how it would be. We didn't know who would come. We didn't know what the atmosphere would be like. We didn't know if they would accuse each other, if they would live in the middle. But they came, and when they came, we knew we have a book, a project. So, before I share with you the rest of the story, let's look on our project map. Theme, define inner goals, approach writers, develop a theme for a story collection, fiction stories about the contact between nations, writing schedule, editing schedule, translation for Arabic, Hebrew, and English, publication in Scandinavia, submission to other territories. We were in a good place. Well, I'm sure that you are familiar with that date, but for whom they wants to hear all about it again in summary, on October 7th, 3,000 Palestinians who live under occupation and terror control broke through the border into the state of Israel. They murdered, raped, kidnapped, and slaughtered 1,400 Israeli citizens. In response to this, the IDF entered Gaza and killed an unimaginable number of 50,000 Palestinians over the past 20 months. What's next? The very same day, on October 7th, Rawya and I spoke on the phone. I asked her how she was. We were both crying in that conversation. I'm in Tel Aviv. She is in Abu Snan. It's a small village near Haifa, north in the country, Palestinian village. There were alarms and bombings while we were talking. Now we were no longer co-editors. Now we were two mothers who fear from a third world war and run to the shelter with the kids. And then at some point of the conversation, she asked me, Sarai, do you think all of our writers are still alive? Do you remember the writer from Gaza who wrote the story No? Her cover name is Sama Hassan. She wrote a new story for our collection about a mother who suffers a lot until she gave birth to her only child. In the plot, she is dreaming of his wedding day and her future grandchildren, while she is receiving the news of his death in the war. This writer worked with us via email. We cannot enter Gaza, of course, even before the war, and she could never go out. And we followed her artistic page on Facebook. Back then, in 2023, she was still afraid to publish her stories in the Arab world under her real name. But after the war burst, she asked us to send her some money. She wanted to return the money to her daughter's fiancé and escape with her family from the horrifying Gaza war to Egypt. We paid her for the story, of course, and collected another big donation for her and succeeded to transfer it to her through a friend who works as a nurse in East Jerusalem and has relatives in Gaza. It was very complicated to do it back then. But since then, Sama Hassan asks us for help whenever she needs. Our project helped her to build new life outside of the war. We helped her son to find a job and bought her daughter a mobile phone so she could communicate with others. But the real issue is that Sama Hassan taught us that our project is not only a literary one, it's also a humanitarian one. During our discussion about the situation of Sama, essential questions regarding other stories in the project have been raised. For example, Rawya wrote a fictional story based on a true story about a Palestinian girl who became blind in a terror attack and wants to learn how to swim. She never swam before, and her teacher is an Israeli woman who lost her son in a previous war. They enter the water together and learn how to trust each other. This is also the name of the story, trust. Then Rawya tells me, it's a lovely story, but there's no way we'll ever get to print it. And I ask why, and she said, it is a story about love and compassion and hope. Who will read it in these terrible times? And I said, no, this is the exact time to read it. That's the power of literature. Small power, but still to express humanity in the most difficult times. Think about the war books that you read that changed your life. The strongest moments in them are about human gestures in horrible times. This conversation made us to go back and read all stories, and we start collecting them again via WhatsApp. One story deals with a battle shock. Another is about an Israeli guy giving a ride to a Palestinian guy and they get closer. Another story is about a Palestinian woman who tries to stop the war with her body. One story is about the relationship inside human rights movement. Another story is about a Hebrew-speaking dog that got lost in an Arab village. And when we get back to the stories and read them one by one, we realize that no book is more relevant now. So we continued. A great achievement of this collection is a story from the city Hebron. It's written by Idras Garat, that was born and raised there. The event of the story takes place in Hebron city, a holy piece of land for the Islam and Jews, a place of dispute over holy Jewish graves. This story is about an Arab man that risked his life to stay in his homeland, a place where any wrong movement could trigger a violent outburst towards him. I want to share with you a paragraph from this story. One day, and I quote, clashes erupt between Jews and Arabs when thousands of Jews visited the city, which is under both Palestinian and Israeli authority. During the annual Torah reading ceremonies near Ibrahimi Mosque, where Abraham buried his wife, Sarah, his father used to say, it's about his heroine's father, the settlers will live, and we will live, and the graves will remain a point of contention for those who will come after us. This story is based on a true testimonial story about a woman whose husband was killed on the day of this religious celebration. Then she was forced to move to another city in Israel and wondered who will support her and her children. Eventually, she left with only with her young son, Faliha, who supports her, till he was killed by soldiers at the checkpoint on his way back to Hebron. Another story, but similar, I guess, told from the opposite perspective, was written by the Hebrew author Yaniv Itzkovich. This story deals with a young soldier suffering from PTSD. In Israel, a famous artist named Menashe Kadishman, is known for the sculpting and painting sheep. In Itzkovich's story, a young soldier is supposed to kill a Palestinian militant, but instead kills a sheep. This sheep, akin to Kadishman artistic representation, become a hyper-realistic symbol of the soldier's guilt and the moral questions surrounding him as the state of Israel sends him into the battle. The story highlights the human side of the war traumas. But when the war started, the challenges of the project were so many. Few of the writers left. They could not reread their own stories after tragic personal loss from both sides. We have often had to postpone work meeting about the book project, even the preparation for this specific presentation, because one of us needed to take shelter from the muscles. The peak of the work on this book, which is now in its final translation stages, took place during bloody war that is still ongoing. Our book publication was delayed because of the war and will come out, I hope, only next year. But even if it's not ready yet, even if it's just an idea, there are now 20 people from both sides of a terrible war that have been working together on a short story collections against all odds. Before I started to work on this project, I thought that my strength as an editor was my professional judgment. But the war made me understand what this project was about. It's not about stories of Hebrew-Palestinian conflict or contact. It is a project about people on both sides of the fence who wants to create an effective art together in an impossible reality. And when I realized this, things started to move. The will of the artist produced excellent and powerful stories that do not avoid the terrible situation, but find in it some hope. That's the reason I wanted to come here today, to show the possibilities of literary personas to impact in some level on a heart-breaking situation. For me, this book is just the beginning of discussion that connects wars and political conflicts to fiction stories of reconciliation and shared hope. You are welcome to share your thoughts with me whenever you wish. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Sarai, really. I mean, I'll have the privilege of asking questions first, but of course we'll open up the conversation to a lively discussion in a little while. I'll just start by saying that for those of you who don't know Sarai, we're sitting in the presence of a force of nature who, as you could see, really has her hands in a multitude of cultural events, festivals, translations, projects, publishing, editing, and we've known each other for many years, and one of the things that I find most intriguing is that we come to literature from such a different perspective and with different questions. So the first thing that I want to ask you, and again, this is maybe because my own interest, is about the process of translation involved here. So did you imagine the book to be a trilingual book that presents the original language with a translation? Why English, if at all? who are the translators? Did they have difficulty coming into the project? So some more material context about that.
Yeah, it's a very good and important question because it was one of our dilemmas in the project. The languages, for example. Should we publish this book in Israel right now, in this climate? Maybe yes, maybe no. We decided eventually with the Politican publisher and with the Forum Circle to do it, to publish it in Hebrew, in Arabic language for the Arab readers in Israel, and in many languages outside.
But each separately, right? So
each
the books
separately.
are not presented
Each separately because it's too long, it's like technical matter. But it's not the main reason, because you know how it is in translation, you need to wrap the book right for the right audience. So for example, for the American and English readers, we add non-fiction stories, testimonials of real people from both sides that are like combined with the fiction stories that inspired actually the writers to write. We wanted to show that we are not deleting the situation. We all live in the world, we read news, right? But we wanted to show the complex and maybe, I don't know, the only way to connect fiction to non-fiction political subjects is to put them together and show the complexity of both sides. Regarding the translators, they translate and cry. They write us, I cried so many times in this paragraph. We chose the one that are like peace activists because they're very good professionally, but they are the only one that would want to participate in that kind of a project. It was very, very hard for us to trace translators from Hebrew to Arabic. Finally, we have this amazing translator woman from Ramallah, but it was very hard to convince even her that she's on this world of projects to join in, because the war, it was hard before the war, and of course now it's even harder to people to define their own political point of view regarding the situation, because in Israel, you get up in the morning and in 10 a.m. there is a terror attack, and in 12 there is alarms and bombings, and afternoon so many people you read in the newspaper that die in Gaza today, and it's just, I don't know, in 6-7 hours period of time. So how can you even start to understand who you are politically when you are living inside disaster? And most people in Israel are broken-hearted right now from the government, from what's happening, from the Gaza situation, and they feel like they're in this trap. And also the literary people. But we did it. I think our nechishut, how you say? Resilience. That we are resistance. We are so in this project for so many years that we didn't give up, even that we had so many times to do so. So it's happening, yes.
I want to go back to the question of the material presentation of the book. Mm-hmm. Did you think about presenting the stories one at a time? So how did you organize the voices? Yeah. Was it theme-oriented, positioned geographically, chronological, whatever?
As an editor, the first question, which is the most hard, it's like, who do you love the most, mommy or dad? The first story in this book, Palestinians, because we are killing them, maybe Israeli, because to show the other side of the war, that we are keen for peace, some of us. It was, you sit in these work meetings and you don't know what to say after 2 hours of just mumbling about it. Eventually it's going to be Sama Hassan's story because of her powerful connection to the project. But I wanted to put a voice of a woman from Gaza that speaks out, that leaning in. Though she writes under cover names, still she has so much courage to do what she does. So that's the reason I supported this idea, because of her woman in Gaza more than the war and the political situation. We managed to separate, to divide the book for 4 chapters, like main chapters. One is about relationship, one is about army service, one is about motherhood, because we have a lot of stories about mothers who unfortunately lost their children in wars. And the last one is about general code love, like love stories inside the climate of war. So also we thought about that, about the flow of the book, because the materials, though it's fiction, most of them are fiction, it's so hard to read sometimes that you need like this line, this bigger story to just to get through it. And it's not an easy book. It's not escapism. It's not Jojo Moyes. It's not even, I don't know, Yuval Noah Harari. It's not a method. It's a story about broken-hearted people that believe in hope. That's the premise. And it's a very hard premise to sell to a reader. But I think the stories, the quality of the stories are very good, and I hope that literary people could find themselves in it. Not only it's because it's a political book, but first of all because it's a good literature to read and to understand something about human nature or the world right now. Yeah.
So I'm going to play devil advocate for just a minute, because clearly both of us are on the side of literature. But in a moment in which, as you said, reality is so acute, is there even an interest in fiction, or, you know, in your words, what is the power of fiction if these people could straightforwardly perhaps tell the story of their everyday lives? Perhaps, again, like antagonistically, we could say that would be even stronger, that would serve something about the problem of false and truth right now. Like, what do we get when these writers are telling us fiction rather than
documentary testimonials?
Yes.
Yes, well, it's a good question. I think the answer is in your question. This book, it's not about solutions, and it's not about escapism, and it's not only about an emotional reading experience. First of all, it's a first key for discussion about all what you said right now, right? You know, I gave up literature so many times. Every 1 or 2 years, I said to my husband, okay, this is over. This world is over. Literary people are dinosaurs. I'm going to move to high-tech, startup nation. You know, I'm going to make loads of money. And then there is Elena Parente that come from out of, I don't know, nowhere, and write a book about her nemesis. And then the world is like a flame, right? We can never know how book will be presented, if people would like it or not. We can never know the next trend, the next fashion. This book is not about trends and fashions at all, but I think if we need to publish it, we need to publish it on its time. And now this is the time, because I don't know what will happen in Israel or Palestine or Gaza or America in a year from today. I stopped knowing anything after the 7th of October. Before that, I knew everything. Now I'm like, okay, I live till noon. Perfect. Let's go for the gym. Yeah, let's write an article. It's a very complex time for Israelis and Palestinians, of course, to make decisions regarding the future. And I hold on to this project because I felt that if we won't complete it, I don't think it will ever happen. And now it's happening, and I feel it's something. Maybe it's small something, but it's something to contribute to the other side, the human side of this terrible war. Yes.
Do I have time for one more question, Rebecca? So I want to ask you, in this double hat of a writer and an editor, because you were talking about, the instability of reality. And it also seems that there is an acute instability of language. I mean, many of the words that you said as you were saying them, a conflict, humanitarian, we see that with Zionism, war, all of these words have been so cynically used by both sides that
Nobody know what it means anymore, right?
Exactly, it becomes like an empty shell. Yeah. And I wonder, if you see something happening to language in that collection and in your own writing.
Yeah. You know what I learn about language when I edit those stories? That the only word that are still hanging there, it's the word pain. You cannot measure pain. You cannot compare pain. You can, of course, but you cannot do it emotionally, so subjectively. And maybe, for me personally, to heal pain is to write or read or be surrounded with words, these kind of words, like library words. Not to talk with people also, but to be inside of this literary capsula that protect me, that actually taught me how to live personally. So I feel that there is some word I still believe to, and I feel, of course, I'm aware of the cynical uses that you mentioned, of the woke movement, of what happened in America and what happened early at the war in the America campuses, and of course we all live in the world, but I still feel that this book is nothing about that. It's not ironic, it's not cynical. It is about pain, and it is about humanity, and it is about hope. And I think it tries to prove that it's all about people. Eventually, bottom line, it's about private people and their own stories regarding the conflict, big world, but it's their lives, it's about their lives. And I think for a fiction story, it's very authentic, yes.
Okay, I'll have two different questions and then you'll choose whichever one you want to tackle.
Okay, thank you. Good for me.
The first one is about, you gave us kind of a snippet of two stories. Mm-hmm. The Israeli or Hebrew one is about the PTSD soldier. And a lot of the time, criticism mounted, perhaps rightly so, against Hebrew literature is that it kind of celebrates the army soldier that as we say, it shoots and cries, mm-hmm. right? That attacks, but then kind of feels mournful about it. And I've heard quite a lot, of writing and talk about this. Yeah. Do you feel like this is a repeating image, figure? What do you feel about it? How does it come into play with the other stories?
It's a very, very harsh point because we had more of those in our collection and we just put them out because we had enough from these traumas. But this story about soldier that he wants to be the best soldier, like the best soldier ever in every war. And eventually he holds this dead sheep in his hands and understands that it will never work. That this method of killing each other or killing the Arabs, it won't work. And I think it's about the transition from to shoot and cry to stop shooting. And that's the reason that I chose it. Of course it's problematic. One of the stories that withdrawn from the project is a very, very famous writer in Israel and also peace activist. He even won very important prize in Israel a few years ago and donated it to the Forum Circle. And he was the first phone I got, I think the 10th of October, that he told me, okay, this is too much. I have 2 members of my family that slaughters in the south of the country. I cannot read this peace story that I wrote for you, and I'm sorry. I still believe in peace, but right now I cannot do anything with Palestinian people. And I was shocked by it because you're supposed to know better, right? But when pain meets the conflict, when the emotional side of you is like taking over your rationality, you cannot argue with that. That's the reason that people are going to shrink, right? To solve those problems. I cannot solve it through literature. Those questions, Yael, it's the beginning of discussion of the connection between the power of literature, between the cliches or genres of the Hebrew literature about wars, about army services, to the current situation. I think it's one of the main goals of this project to raise those questions and try to see what we have now, because now most of people in the Middle East, they don't see anything but surviving. And I hope in the future, with the help of this book and other projects, we can really open those questions to a real intelligent discussion, yeah.
Okay, Swear, my final question.
Yes, thank you.
We're talking about kind of, when you were using terms, you said Arab writers, Palestinian writers, and we know coming from the Middle East that this is a huge plurality, right? So northern Muslim communities do not align themselves necessarily with southern. Palestinians choose specific, categories to use or to describe their positionality. Israeli Arabs, citizens, or in the West Bank sometimes use different contexts. So do these writers, how do they feel about this collectivity or being put in this category?
One of the writers of our project, Sheikha Khaliwa, that's her name. She's Palestinian Israeli. She's a citizen of Israel, but she defines herself as a Palestinian because she connects with her ancestors, of course. An Arab that speaks Hebrew and writes in Hebrew. And we had this discussion about her identity after the 7th of October, and she told me, and I quote, "I don't know who I am anymore. I'm a woman, I think. That's it. That's what I'm a writer, of course, but I don't know who I am anymore. I don't know which side I need to take because I live and pay taxes in this country that use it for weapons against my cousins in Gaza. And I'm writing in Hebrew like Anton Shamas, like Said Kishua, that adopt the Hebrew as a main language, though it's not their mother tongue. And I'm Palestinian because I celebrate all the Palestinians event. I grew up on the Palestinian folklore, and there is one. It's not only about Palestine, it's not only about Gaza, it's also about culture. They have their own, legacy. And now I don't know who I am anymore, because when the Iranian sends a missile, I run to the Israeli shelter in my Israeli home. It's very complicated for them. But I think for those kind of people that are artists and very sensitive people, they need to write to figure it out. And when you write, you always come with a question. I don't think if you get the answer through writing, but you come with this essential question for your life. If not, our mothers, the writers' mothers, they didn't want them to be, writers. They want them to be doctors. In Israel, it's lawyers, to do exit, in high tech, of course. I think people that are writing, they really need it. They cannot manage without it. And the first thing she did is to start a new book about her identity, Sheikha Khaliwa. Yes.
Okay, I think we'll open it up for conversation.
I'll be happy to, yes. Please.
Yeah, I have a question. I couldn't help but think of Colin McCann's A Paragon.
Of course.
Of course. Israeli and Palestinians who both men who suffered immense tragedies and used that as a catalyst for working towards peace. Has anything like that happened amongst authors in your group, or is everyone writing? Or it happened in terms of bonding or getting to know each other, or people still very much in common?
Yeah, well, Colin McCann.
Repeat the question.
Yeah,
just
of course. What's your name?
Oh, Patty.
Paddy asked about Colin McCann project, Paragon, that he actually wrote a fictional memoir about true story of an Israeli father and both fathers, one from the Israeli side and one from the Palestinian side. It's actually a forum circle members, both of them. And he connected with the forum and came to Israel to meet them and lived in Israel for a few months and just talked with them, and inspired by their own testimonial stories, because they become very close friends, though they're from the other side of the fence, of course. He wrote that story, which for the Israeli audience and also for the Palestinian audience, it's very problematic. I don't know how it is, because you are foreign and you come to speak in our name, in your own, creative methods, in your own poetics, because I think they felt that the Paragon project is quite far from their own experience as people that live in this situation. And I think this is the main difference, because here it's the real people. Yaniv Itzkovich, that wrote about the ship, He actually fought in 4 Israeli wars and got this war trauma. And now he tries to figure it out who it is as a writer. Now what I think, of course, after the 7th of October, so it's like it's the real thing. Though it's fiction, the emotional truth is very strong. So those projects eventually are quite different. Yes?
My question was,
Yeah.
even if it was fictional,
Mm-hmm.
he creates a scenario where there's healing between them.
Yeah.
And working towards bringing the cultures together.
Yeah, we have that. We have that, of course. We have few of those. Not all stories, but at least half. It's about the reconciliation. It's about the connection. It's about mothers from both sides that start to talk to each other. It's about forgiveness to the person who killed your son. Those narratives are truly exist in our project, of course.
The narratives that any real life relationships.
Yes, it's in the doc for the American audience. Yeah. For the American audience, you in the future you could read the testimonials that will combined in the project. Yes.
Yeah.
Hi.
Hi.
2 quick questions. One is I saw in the photos of the contributors that one is Rawya Burbara,
Nachon.
who worked on this campus for 3 years.
Yes, I know.
And so I'm curious about her submission, if you can talk about it.
Yeah, of course.
And then also you've been talking mostly as an editor, and since you've just been talking so beautifully about the need to write and the central questions that are happening in a writer's life, I'm just wondering what your writing is centering around right now, and what that looks like.
Thank you. Well, regarding Rawya Burbara, she has a very interesting story. She's not a writer, but she writes beautifully. She is a peace activist. She used to grow up in a very religious neighborhood in Jerusalem, and then she got out from the religion to the non-religion life, but she took a lot of literature with her, and now she is approaching it and teach it in the Chiloni. In a secular communities, and she also a very famous figure right now in Israel because she did a wonderful project near Gaza with children and mothers from both sides, and just recorded their own testimonial stories, and now it's on TV and we can expose to it. So that's the reason we picked her, because we felt that she's really on the heart of things. And she wrote this beautiful story about 2 mothers from both sides that has this mystical, telepathic connection between them. And one is actually saving the other's son in the 7th of October. In the first hours, she's just saving his life. And it's based on true story. It's so powerful. The name of the story is Motherhood. It's heartbreaking. That's the one that the translator called me and he said, I'm crying from Rawya Burbara, because it's like, it's very easy to identify with the materials. Regarding myself, I wrote a story for this collection, and I felt like the ethical act to do is to write fiction story that is based on real events. And I found a real event that happened, I don't know, in the 80s, between Israeli soldiers and Palestinian autistic guy. On the checkpoint, he wants to go to the other side, to his grandmother's village, and they won't let to, and they make fun of him. It was before the political correct, it was before everything. But one of them, my hero in the story, he understands that this is the end. He just take off his uniforms. And I want to write about the transition, the transformation, because there is moments that you understand that something is wrong. Moments in life for all of us, and then you change. You need to change. You change, It's a life, it's like deal breaker for your personality. And I want to catch that in fiction. So I think all of us now, Israeli writers, are writing about the war. It swallowed everything else. Now I write about my mother, about my relationship, it's so big. I write mostly poetry about the kidnapped people, about the Gaza situation. And sometimes I published it, and sometimes I cannot because I feel it's too sad, it's too much. So I'm negotiating with myself regarding my poetics right now. Yes. Yes.
In your list of a successful project, you had strategy, and this book sounds like it'll be a way for people to understand the humanity of both sides, but it can only do that if people read it.
Yeah.
So I wonder what your strategy is to getting people who need to learn about the other side to read it.
Yeah. I guess university, it's a very good place to start, because people here, the environment of this place and other places is to learn how to read and how to think bikoti, how to think critically about complicated situations. So I think this book is really important for education systems, maybe in high schools, maybe at universities. I don't know yet what will happen to it, but now we are in a situation that a very big publishers have an interest in it, and I hope it will help him to go to a young audience, to show, it's not to show something new, but it's maybe to show new perspective about this very, very big situation, because I think it's relevant not only for Israel and Palestine and Iran and the Middle East, it's very relevant to America, very relevant to the situation here, even financially. Who put the money on all this war? Okay, it's like, it's big nations that are struggling above our heads. And also about the Islam situation, which is very, very strong all over the world. And I think those Islamic voices are different, and sometimes they are critique their own society regarding the political situation. So, I don't know, but I hope, it's like a drop in the sea. You're sending something. But for me, as a literary editor, it's a very important moment in my profession, to do this book, to publish it. Yes.
Well, you started out talking about the Oslo Accord, and I see it, I try to see every film that I can possibly see.
Mm-hmm.
And I do a lot of reading, and I'm an active member of various interfaith organizations.
Mm-hmm.
And so you started with Oslo, and I know from the film that the first day or two, whoever decided or was moved to go to Oslo, to be invited to Oslo, they just spent a day or two or eating and learning about each other's families.
Mm-hmm.
Do you remember that?
No, I actually didn't know that.
But it totally makes sense. When you want to, you talked by yourself, you talked about you have a child or two, or how many?
A few. Yeah.
And a husband.
Yeah.
Okay, so we always define ourselves first as how is it, who do we belong to?
Right.
So the concept of belonging, I know from studying psychology, is that in the same category of needs of belonging is feeling capable of being loved and being capable of loving.
Maybe just tell us
Can
the
we just-
question so that we have one more.
I'm thinking that your theme, that the arc of your book, the cord that connects is this various things. What does it mean to belong?
Yeah. It's about identity, I think, and about surviving, and also about family and belonging. You're absolutely right about that. The Forum Circle that ordered the book and that producing the book de facto, it's all about that. They take the Hebrew Jewish families from Israel that lost their loved ones in terror attacks and wars, and there are so many of them. Take 75 years back, in every family, right, there is one, at least one, Now it's a Memorial Day in Israel. Whew, celebrations, very sad, tragic celebration, but it's very present in our reality, in our social reality. And of course, in the Palestinian side, now we cannot compare the numbers. So, and they try to connect between the cultures through the pain, through the loss, and to show that there is another possibility in their ideal agenda is to stop fighting and stop killing each other, of course, which is a very naive agenda, but this is the agenda. And I think it's also the agenda of the book. So yes, it's also about belonging.
But you also said a word,
No, we're going to move
Take
on to
another
other
question.
questions.
forgiveness.
Yeah, that's true.
Hi.
Hi.
My name's Alea.
Hi, Lea.
It's nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you.
I was just wondering if I got here a little late. I'm sorry about that.
It's okay.
But what is the main message of your work and the multitude of works that are going into this book that you want to be received on the audience's behalf?
The writer, Karl Ove Knausgård, you know him. He's a Norwegian guy. I heard him speaking once in this literary festival, and he told a very interesting and very meaningful sentence that I took. He told, literature, it's not for countries, and it's not for politics. It's for people, for the real people, and it's supposed to deal on life of real people. And I think it's all about that. I want to show and achieve showing that this book, it's about the people and about the price that they pay just because they were born into this mess. And I want to see that maybe there is another option of living, even for them, even inside the war, inside the mess, just by deciding and expressing a voice that this is wrong, this is not a way to live. So it's very simple, but I think this is very important as well.
So like a reminder of humanity in that sense.
Leah Goldberg, your name is Leah?
Alea.
Leah, so similar. She's the most famous national poet, Hebrew poet ever. She died, I don't know, 30 years ago, 40 years ago. And on the Second World War II, her friends, her colleagues, men poets, they asked her to write poems about the war. And she wrote, but she wrote about love, nature, compassion. And they were very mad at her, till the situation got so bad that she could not have dinner with them anymore because it was like a thing. And then she wrote this very, very beautiful and famous article that it called על אותו הנושא עצמו, about that subject that you all know. And she told that the role of the poet, it's not to write poems about situation, it's just to remind the readers that they are still human beings. And I think it's all about that.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I think Rebecca has a question.
Yeah, Rebecca.
Yeah, this is kind of from an angle, but as I've been driving to work this week, all of the stories, or many of the stories, have been actually from Vietnamese American writers writing about sort of the sort of marking or commemoration of 50 years since the fall of Saigon and the end of the Vietnam War.
Mm-hmm.
And they're all writers who've been sort of still processing even their parents, or they're arriving with their parents when they were children, and so sort of 50 years later. So I was thinking about that in relation to your stories, which are fresh.
Yeah,
And sort of about, I mean, of course, there are layers
of course.
in the Israeli context as well, and in the Palestinian context. But
The problem with Israel is that you don't have the perspective, you don't have time, because every 2 years you have new war. So
that's what I'm wondering about, sort of around memory and, loss, and sort of what the luxury of time, and sort of what it means to be writing now and war, like in the midst of war, versus sort of what it might look like down the road as sort of reflections either if there's peace or if this war passes, and then sort of how is that different for the writers involved?
yeah, well, this book, it didn't have the privilege to have perspective at all. It's written from the trauma, during the trauma, and on the trauma, most of the stories. And even if it's not deals with on the 7th of October, all the atmosphere is about that, of course, because it swallowed the rest. I think it will be very, very interesting, and I hope not too tragic, but it will be tragic to read 7th of October's fiction in 50 years from today. Actually, in October 23, it was 50 years from the Yom Kippur War, and so many movies and fiction and non-fiction projects were out, and then this war swallowed it. This is like the ironic situation of the Middle East, that you don't have time to process anything. I hope that what this book can do, if not to give the perspective, understanding about these main issues, is to give through fiction the emotional testimony of its time. It's a book of its time. Now, those writers, they're from our time. It's contemporary. It's like the most contemporary book that you can imagine. And this is its power. I hope that in the future we will read it and it will seem as this history dream, terrible nightmare. Wow, I'm so glad it is over, just a book right now, that we can write about other things, about love, about, I don't know, about other subjects. Yes?
How do we track and know when the book is out?
I will ask Yael to send you the link of the book when it will be out, and I hope you will see it in the bookshops in Berkeley, or as well. I hope.
Thank you so much, Sarai.
Thank you all for coming. Thank you.